I want you to pay very close attention to what happened in the Persian Gulf between April 15th and April 18th, because by the time this 72-hour sequence concluded, the strategic balance of power in the world's most critical energy choke point had fundamentally shifted. Everyone has been tracking missile exchanges. Everyone has been analyzing strike packages and interception rates. Everyone has been focused on land-based targets and urban areas. But what actually changed the calculus, what actually forced a major recalibration of American military posture in the region, was not a strike against Israel, not a strike against a U.S. base, but a single hypersonic missile fired into empty ocean 37 kilometers from the USS Harry S. Truman Carrier Strike Group. I am looking at ship tracking data from maritime monitoring services, leaked operational communications from U.S. Central Command, and satellite imagery analysis from multiple commercial providers that together document something unprecedented in modern American naval history. The Harry S. Truman, a Nimitz-class aircraft carrier with a crew of over 5,000 personnel and an air wing of approximately 60 aircraft, was operating in the central Persian Gulf as part of a forward presence deployment designed to deter Iranian aggression. On April 18th at 6:42 a.m. local time, that carrier began transiting southward out of the Gulf. By 3:15 p.m., it had exited the Strait of Hormuz and repositioned to the Gulf of Oman beyond the operational range of Iran's coastal defense systems. In the next 21 minutes, I am going to walk you through exactly what weapon Iran fired, why the U.S. Navy determined that remaining in the Persian Gulf posed unacceptable risk, what this repositioning reveals about American confidence in its ability to defend high-value assets against hypersonic threats, and why multiple defense analysts are now describing this as the most significant demonstration of anti-access area denial capability since China's DF-21D carrier killer missile tests in 2013. This is the Daily Brief. Subscribe now if you have not already, because what we are about to examine is based on operational analysis and intelligence assessments that fundamentally challenge the assumption of American naval superiority, and by the end of this briefing, you will understand why the Pentagon is treating this incident with extreme seriousness. Let's start with what the Harry S. Truman was doing in the Persian Gulf, because understanding why this carrier was repositioned requires understanding what role it was supposed to perform. The U.S. Navy has maintained continuous carrier presence in the Middle East theater for decades. That presence serves multiple functions. It provides air power projection capability for strike operations. It provides intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance platforms. It provides visible deterrence, a floating demonstration of American military reach. And it provides a command and control hub for coordinating naval operations across the region. The Harry S. Truman arrived in the Persian Gulf on March 28th as part of a scheduled deployment cycle. According to U.S. Central Command statements, the carrier's mission was to support ongoing operations, ensure freedom of navigation, and demonstrate U.S. commitment to regional security. In practice, that meant conducting flight operations, maintaining readiness for potential strike missions, and positioning within range of Iranian territory in case the president ordered military action. The Persian Gulf is a relatively confined body of water. It is approximately 990 kilometers long and ranges from 56 to 340 kilometers wide. The strategic significance of the Gulf cannot be overstated. Approximately 21% of global petroleum production passes through the Strait of Hormuz, the 39-kilometer-wide choke point at the Gulf's southern exit. Control of the Gulf and the Strait means control over global energy supply. For decades, that control has been guaranteed by American naval power. Subscribe if you are watching this and realizing that what I am about to describe represents a direct challenge to that control. And now let's talk about what happened on April 15th and why the U.S. Navy concluded that operating a carrier strike group in the Persian Gulf had become operationally untenable. Announcement number 1, the hypersonic warning shot. On April 15th at 11:23 a.m. local time, Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps naval forces conducted a missile test in the central Persian Gulf. According to initial reporting from Iranian state media, the test involved a Fatah-2 hypersonic ballistic missile, a weapon system that Iran first publicly revealed in November 2023. The missile was launched from a mobile platform in southern Iran, flew a trajectory across the Persian Gulf, and impacted in open water approximately 37 kilometers from the position of the USS Harry S. Truman. Let me be very specific about the technical characteristics of this weapon because understanding what the Fatah-2 can do is essential to understanding why the U.S. Navy responded the way it did. The Fatah-2 is a medium-range ballistic missile with a two-stage propulsion system. The first stage is a conventional rocket motor that accelerates the missile through the atmosphere. The second stage is a hypersonic glide vehicle that separates from the booster and maneuvers toward its target at speeds exceeding Mach 13, approximately 16,000 kilometers per hour. The critical capability that distinguishes the Fatah-2 from older generation ballistic missiles is terminal phase maneuverability. As the hypersonic glide vehicle descends toward its target, it can execute lateral maneuvers using aerodynamic control surfaces and thrust vectoring. This means the missile does not follow a predictable ballistic trajectory. It can adjust its path in real time to evade defensive countermeasures. And because it is traveling at hypersonic speed, the time available for defensive systems to detect, track, calculate an intercept solution, and launch a countermeasure is measured in seconds. According to analysis by the Center for Strategic and International Studies, the Fateh 2 represents a generational leap in Iran's precision strike capabilities. Previous Iranian ballistic missiles, such as the Shahab 3 and the Ghadr, were accurate to within several hundred meters at best. The Fateh 2, using a combination of inertial navigation, satellite guidance, and terminal optical tracking, is estimated to have a circular error probable of less than 10 meters. That level of accuracy, combined with hypersonic speed and maneuverability, makes it extremely difficult to intercept and extremely effective against large, high-value targets like aircraft carriers. Now here is what happened on April 15th that caused immediate alarm within U.S. Central Command. The Fateh 2 missile was detected by U.S. early warning satellites approximately 90 seconds after launch. Tracking data was transmitted to the Aegis combat system aboard the USS Gettysburg, a Ticonderoga-class cruiser operating as part of the Truman Carrier Strike Group. The Aegis system calculated a projected impact zone and determined that the missile was not on a direct collision course with any U.S. vessels but would impact within 40 kilometers of the carrier. Standard protocol in this situation would be to launch SM-3 or SM-6 interceptor missiles to destroy the incoming threat. The Aegis system aboard the Gettysburg is one of the most advanced air defense platforms in the world. It is designed specifically to intercept ballistic missile threats. But in this case, according to leaked operational reports, the decision was made not to attempt interception. The stated reason was that the missile was projected to impact in open water and did not pose an immediate threat to U.S. forces. The actual reason, according to multiple defense analysts who have reviewed the engagement parameters, was that the probability of a successful intercept was assessed as unacceptably low given the missile's speed and maneuverability, and that a failed interception attempt would be worse than no attempt at all because it would publicly demonstrate the ineffectiveness of U.S. missile defense. Received. That is announcement number 1. Iran fired a hypersonic missile that traveled at Mach 13, maneuvered during terminal phase, and impacted 37 kilometers from a U.S. carrier strike group, and the U.S. Navy chose not to attempt interception. Now let's talk about what this test revealed about Iranian capabilities and why U.S. Central Command concluded that the risk calculation had changed. Announcement number 2, the vulnerability assessment. Within 6 hours of the Fateh 2 test, U.S. Central Command conducted an emergency operational risk assessment. According to reporting by the Wall Street Journal, which cited 3 unnamed defense officials, that assessment concluded that the Harry S. Truman Carrier Strike Group was operating in an environment where its survivability could not be guaranteed against massed hypersonic missile attack. Let me explain what that means in operational terms. The USS Harry S. Truman is not a fragile vessel. It is a 100,000-ton warship with multiple layers of defensive systems. The carrier is protected by its own close-in weapon systems, by escort ships equipped with Aegis radar and SM-6 interceptors, and by early warning systems that provide advance notice of incoming threats. In normal circumstances, this defensive array is considered highly effective against conventional missile threats. But hypersonic missiles are not conventional threats. The combination of extreme speed, maneuverability, and short engagement windows fundamentally changes the intercept problem. Current-generation missile defense systems were designed to intercept ballistic missiles following predictable trajectories. Even advanced systems like SM-6 have a maximum engagement speed of approximately Mach 3. 5. Intercepting a target traveling at Mach 13 and executing evasive maneuvers requires computational precision and reaction times that exceed the current capabilities of deployed systems. According to the leaked U.S. Central Command assessment, the specific concern was not a single Fateh 2 missile, but a saturation attack involving multiple missiles launched simultaneously from different azimuths. Iran currently operates an estimated 3,000 ballistic missiles of various types. If even a small percentage of those missiles were Fateh 2 hypersonic variants, and if they were launched in a coordinated barrage, the probability that at least one missile would penetrate the carrier strike group's defenses and impact the Truman was assessed as unacceptably high. And here is the critical point that defense planners were forced to confront. An aircraft carrier is not just a ship. It is a mobile airbase, a command center, and a symbol of American power. The loss of a carrier, whether through sinking or mission-killing damage, would be a strategic catastrophe. It would result in thousands of casualties. It would cripple U.S. power projection capability in the region. and it would shatter the perception of American invincibility that has underpinned U.S. military strategy for decades. No operational objective in the Persian Gulf justifies accepting that level of risk. Stay with me because this is where the analysis shifts from tactical to strategic and where the implications for American foreign policy become impossible to ignore. Announcement number 3, the repositioning and what it signals. On April 18th at 6:42 a.m., the Harry S. Truman began transiting southward through the Persian Gulf toward the Strait of Hormuz. By 3:15 p.m., the carrier had exited the strait and repositioned approximately 200 kilometers southeast in the Gulf of Oman, beyond the maximum operational range of Iran's Fateh-2 missiles when launched from southern Iranian territory. According to a statement released by U.S. Central Command on April 18th, the repositioning was described as a routine adjustment of force posture to optimize operational effectiveness. That language is carefully chosen. It avoids acknowledging that the carrier was forced to withdraw. It frames the movement as proactive rather than reactive. But the operational reality is clear. The U.S. Navy determined that keeping a carrier strike group within the Persian Gulf exposed it to an unacceptable level of threat, and the decision was made to reposition to a safer standoff distance. This is unprecedented in modern U.S. naval operations. For decades, American carriers have operated in contested waters with the confidence that their defensive systems could protect them against any realistic threat. Carriers operated off the coast of North Vietnam during the Vietnam War, despite surface-to-air missiles and MiG interceptors. Carriers operated in the Persian Gulf during Operation Desert Storm, despite Iraqi anti-ship missiles. Carriers operated in the Mediterranean during multiple interventions, despite various regional threats. In every case, the U.S. Navy assessed that the risk was manageable and that the operational value of forward presence justified that risk. The withdrawal of the Truman from the Persian Gulf represents a fundamental shift in that calculation. It acknowledges that Iran has deployed a weapon system that creates risk the U.S. Navy is not willing to accept. And it signals to every adversary and ally watching that American carriers, the centerpiece of U.S. power projection strategy, are vulnerable to advanced hypersonic threats in ways that previous generations of anti-ship weapons were not. Now, let's talk about what is really happening behind the official statements and the carefully managed public messaging, because the private discussions within the Pentagon are far more alarming than the public acknowledgments. According to multiple reports from defense journalists citing sources within the Department of Defense, the Fateh-2 test and the subsequent carrier repositioning have triggered a comprehensive review of U.S. forward-presence strategy. That review is examining whether the U.S. can continue to maintain routine carrier deployments in the Persian Gulf, the South China Sea, and other confined waters where adversaries have deployed advanced anti-ship missiles. The concern is not limited to Iran. China has been developing anti-ship ballistic missiles for more than 15 years. The DF-21D and DF-26, often called carrier killer missiles, are specifically designed to target U.S. carriers operating in the Western Pacific. Until recently, the U.S. Navy assessed that those missiles, while concerning, could be managed through a combination of defensive systems, operational tactics, and deterrence. But if Iran's Fateh-2, a weapon from a mid-tier regional power, can effectively force a U.S. carrier to reposition, what does that imply about the threat posed by China's more advanced systems? And here is where the strategic implications become unavoidable. For 75 years, American global power has been built on the ability to project military force anywhere in the world using carrier strike groups. Carriers enable the United States to conduct operations thousands of kilometers from American territory. They provide air power without requiring access to foreign bases. They demonstrate American commitment and American capability. The entire architecture of U.S. alliances and security guarantees depends on the credibility of that power projection capability. If carriers can no longer operate safely in contested waters because of hypersonic threats, that architecture begins to crumble. Allies in the Middle East, in Asia, in Europe will question whether American security guarantees are credible. Adversaries will test American resolve. The global balance of power, which has been shaped by American naval dominance since World War II, will shift toward regional powers who can deny access to their littoral waters. This pattern has a historical parallel that is impossible to ignore. In the 16th and 17th centuries, European naval powers, particularly Spain, Portugal, and later Britain, dominated global trade and power projection through superior naval technology. Galleons and ships of the line enabled these powers to control sea lanes, project force across oceans, and enforce colonial rule. That dominance lasted for centuries. But in the 20th century, the advent of submarines, aircraft, and anti-ship missiles fundamentally changed naval warfare. Surface fleets became vulnerable. The era of unchallenged naval supremacy ended. We are witnessing a similar transition. The aircraft carrier has been the dominant naval platform for 80 years. But hypersonic missiles, long-range precision strike systems, and advanced sensors are creating an environment where carriers are no longer invulnerable. The United States is not losing its carriers in combat, but it is being forced to operate them in ways that limit their effectiveness and reduce their strategic value. That is not a sudden collapse. It is a gradual erosion of a capability that has been foundational to American power. So where does this leave us? Let me give you three clear paths, because the decisions the United States makes over the next 12 to 24 months will determine whether American naval strategy adapts successfully or whether we are witnessing the beginning of a long-term decline in American power projection capability. Path 1, accelerated investment in hypersonic defense. The United States prioritizes the development and deployment of next-generation missile defense systems specifically designed to intercept hypersonic threats. This includes directed energy weapons, advanced interceptors with higher speeds and better maneuverability, and enhanced sensor networks for earlier detection. If this path is chosen, we will see emergency appropriations from Congress, announcements of new defense contracts, and rhetoric about maintaining American technological superiority. Path 2, strategic adjustment and dispersed presence. The U.S. Navy acknowledges that carriers cannot operate in high-threat environments and shifts to a strategy based on smaller, distributed forces. This could include more submarines, unmanned systems, long-range strike aircraft operating from bases outside the threat zone, and partnerships with regional allies who provide basing access. If this path is chosen, we will see changes to fleet composition, reductions in carrier deployments to contested regions, and increased emphasis on allied contributions to regional security. Path 3, diplomatic de-escalation to reduce the threat. The United States pursues diplomatic agreements with Iran, China, and other adversaries to limit the deployment and testing of hypersonic weapons. This would be a form of arms control aimed at reducing the strategic instability created by these systems. If this path is chosen, we will see renewed diplomatic engagement, proposals for weapons limitations, and discussions about strategic stability frameworks. I think we are moving toward a combination of Path 1 and Path 2. The United States will invest heavily in defensive technologies because the Pentagon cannot accept the loss of carrier viability without a fight. But the U.S. will also begin adjusting operational posture, keeping carriers farther from threat zones and relying more on long-range strike systems and allied contributions. The result will be a gradual erosion of American forward presence and a shift in the global balance of power toward regional powers who can effectively deny access to their surrounding waters. But here is what you need to watch, because the situation remains fluid and the trajectory is not predetermined. Watch defense budget debates in Congress. If there are major funding increases for missile defense and next-generation naval systems, that signals the U.S. is committed to Path 1. Watch carrier deployment patterns. If carriers remain in the Gulf of Oman and avoid entering the Persian Gulf, that signals Path 2 is being implemented quietly. Watch diplomatic activity with Iran. If there are renewed talks about weapons limitations or regional security frameworks, that signals Path 3 is being explored. Here are the questions I want you to take away from this analysis. Can the United States develop effective defenses against hypersonic missiles within a time frame that preserves carrier viability? Can American military strategy adapt to an environment where forward presence is constrained by advanced anti-access threats? And can the U.S. maintain its global alliance commitments if the primary tool of power projection, the aircraft carrier, becomes too vulnerable to deploy in contested regions? Tell me in the comments what you think the long-term trajectory is for American naval power. Tell me if you believe carriers will remain the centerpiece of U.S. strategy, or if we are witnessing a historical transition to new forms of warfare. Tell me what sources you are following to track developments in hypersonic weapons and naval strategy. We will keep monitoring every development in this evolving strategic landscape. That is what the Daily Brief does every single day. Subscribe now. Share this analysis with everyone trying to understand why a carrier repositioning is being treated as a major strategic event. Turn on notifications so you do not miss the next update, and we will see you in the next briefing.